Back. This is episode number 69. Nice. Of Calibrated with Scott. I'm Scott, of course. We have a lot to talk about today. There's one topic in particular that I really wanted to dive into. But before we start, if you guys support my work, you like what I do, the easiest way that you can show your support is by liking, subscribing, and sharing this video. Honestly, it's the easiest way you guys can help. If you feel so inclined, you can support me on Patreon. I'll be posting some videos there. I've been trying to decide what I want to do with my Patreon, whether I want to post videos there, whether I want to make it like a sort of a platform where you guys can ask questions if you're supporters of me, and I'll answer them on stream or on video, whatever. I haven't quite decided, so please follow me there. And then, as always, my Telegram and Twitter. That's where you can find my updates all day. And if you like my stuff here, I'm sure you'll like my stuff there. So go give those a follow. But without further ado, let's get right into it. What I wanted to talk about today was the recent Ukrainian missile strike on the Black Sea Fleet's official headquarters in Sevastopol, Crimea. Obviously, there's a lot to unpack there. So I guess I'll start with the actual event. 2 days ago, we had a large missile strike on Crimea. The Ukrainians carried this missile strike out using British or French Storm Shadow cruise missiles, or Scalp, which is the French version of the Storm Shadow cruise missile. This attack was successful. The Russian Ministry of Defense claimed that the Ukrainians launched 7 Storm Shadow cruise missiles, along with a number of drones to saturate air defense. 4 of these missiles were shot down. 3 of them got through and actually hit the Black Sea Fleet headquarters. And I'll put that video right here. As you can see, the missile comes in and hits the building, does some damage, and that's pretty much the end of it. There's a lot going on here, and I'm going to kind of take it step by step. First off, the actual event itself was an attack carried out with a Western supplied long-ranged weapon, which has been, called a red line. Whatever you want to make of Russian red lines, we have a very Western perspective on this, and we expect some highly emotional and very devastating response when you cross a red line. That's what red lines mean to us. I think when you're talking about Russian red lines, there's a lot coming into play here. In Ukraine, there's a lot at stake, and I'm gonna get into my perspective on all of that here in a second. But red line crossed, it's kind of a big deal. People expect some sort of response. It's also a very flashy target. A lot of the Ukrainian targets that they've been hitting, over the last couple of weeks in the Crimean Peninsula have been very, very flashy targets. Air defense systems, when they go up big. It's a big deal. So the Ukrainians will get 1 or 2 launchers of an air defense system here and there, and it makes it look like some catastrophic event is occurring when really it's just, 1 missile launcher, which is a loss. Don't get me wrong, but Russia produces its own air defense. It's still producing its own air defense. So these are replaceable losses. But it's a big deal. It looks very big. It kind of gives the impression that the Ukrainians are doing damage in Crimea. On top of that, we had the attacks on the dry dock, where 1 landing ship and 1 Kilo class submarine were both damaged or destroyed. That's still up for debate. We'll see if they get fixed. I personally think they're probably not going to get fixed, but I'm no ship expert, so I don't know there. But once again, a flashy target. I'm just going to say this: if the whole Black Sea Fleet were to be destroyed, Russia would still not lose this conflict in Ukraine. That's how insignificant its role is in this conflict. Yes, caliber cruise missiles are nice, and stuff like that, but if those were removed, the Russians are not going to lose the war. So they hit these boats in dry dock, which are already in dry dock, out of service. They're out. It's a win. Let's call it a win. That's another flashy target, though. Really no impact directly on the war, on the offensive being fought in Zaporozhye, but it's still a win. And now with this new strike, it is the most flashy thing that they could have hit. The HQ of the South, the Black Sea Fleet in Sevastopol, and this target once again, the Russians are not running operations out of the official headquarters building of the Black Sea Fleet. That's the place where secretaries hang out. Maybe in peacetime there would be high-ranking officials in here, but during wartime that thing is just a big target. It's just a big stationary building that's there all day, never moves. There's not going to be anybody inside who's in jeopardy of being killed by a strike, especially on the peninsula, especially after the Ukrainians had already kind of crossed that barrier and had started using Storm Shadow missiles on Crimea. There's just no way that the HQ is probably in a bunker somewhere. And if there was anybody in that building that was high ranking, they were there coincidentally. I don't think they're having meetings there. And that is part of the Ukrainian claim in this whole strike, was that a Russian admiral had died. I think the total was supposed to be 35 officers killed, and 100 other personnel wounded. I don't know where those numbers came from. Well, I do know they came from Ukrainian intelligence, which makes it pretty much unbelievable. Whether it's true or not, I will not trust that source at all. It's completely unreliable and just a joke. And back to what I was saying, while it's embarrassing, it really doesn't change anything on the battlefield. Let's just say everything about the strike was correct. The Black Sea Fleet headquarters is gone. All of the admiral is killed, and some high-ranking officers were killed. It's what is the Black Sea Fleet doing in Ukraine, doing for the war effort? Other than the occasional Caliber cruise missile launch, there's not a lot that's just happening here. So again, not a priority target, maybe a target of opportunity, but what I really think this was just them hitting basically an empty building. That's my personal view on it. You're more than welcome to disagree with me, but I want to talk about first off, why they did it, and why they went about doing this, why they chose this target, and then what can the Russians do in response, how the Russians should respond. The Ukrainians chose this target for a very specific reason, and they chose the weapon system that they did it with for a very specific reason. For one, the weapon system that they chose was a red line. That is Western support. This is something that the Ukrainians believe will garner a Russian response in return. So that's the first big thing. The second thing is it may be the only weapon that they actually have that's capable of penetrating Russian air defense and getting to this target. So that could be another reason for the choice. But I think the first reason is really the one we should focus on, because the event happened. So whatever missile they use is unimportant if it hits the building. But where that missile came from is important, and the Ukrainians know that. So they use this weapon system in broad daylight on this building. And what they're trying to do is elicit a Russian response. That's what the Ukrainians have done with all of these escalations. And what I would like to say is that the Ukrainians are on this escalation ladder, and they're really afraid of heights. So they're not going to look down. They're never going to de-escalate and go down the ladder. No, they're just going to keep climbing, keep that head up, and just don't look down. Because if you look down, they're going to stop, right? So they're going to keep escalating. And what I believe is they want to pull NATO and the West into this war more, or at least pull a lot of attention back to the conflict. In the last days, we've seen Zelensky go to the United States. He spoke at the UN. He spoke to Biden. And really, the whole trip looks like a complete failure. It did not accomplish what it needed to accomplish. It was, surrounded by this air of sourness about Zelensky himself, about the Ukraine project in totality. We're going into an election cycle in the US, and every single thing is going to be used against politicians. And Ukraine is a huge thing. We have all of this money going into Ukraine, right? Continuously pushing money in it, and we have problems here in America. So politicians are going to use that against themselves, or each other rather, and then that kind of creates hesitancy, especially into 2024 particularly. And I think that Zelensky's starting to feel that. There's a lot of talk in the West from people like Biden and Kirby about negotiations. you know they're still saying, Ukraine needs to negotiate, the Russians aren't coming to the table, but the Russians are coming to the table, and they've said it since the beginning: we are willing to negotiate. uh, but Ukraine has made it physically, or literally illegal for us to negotiate with them. They made it a law that no Ukrainian can negotiate with a Russian about the SMO. So the Russians have been open to it the entire time. What does open mean exactly is anybody's guess. I'm not behind closed doors, so I don't know what kind of deal the Russians are making. It might be incomprehensible for the Ukrainians to take that deal. So are the Russians really there to negotiate? Who knows? But at least in terms of their public statements, the Russians have always said that they're open to negotiations, whereas the Ukrainians have consistently said 1991 borders, full Russian withdrawal, which is really just a surrender and probably the end of Putin. So it's just incredibly unrealistic, and they don't have that position of strength to really argue from right now at all. So I don't think the Ukrainians want to go to the negotiating table for that reason. And Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, actually said at the UN at a UN Security Council meeting, I believe it was Security Council, that Russia would love to negotiate, but they will not take a ceasefire right now. And that's really what the West is pushing for, is for this ceasefire in Ukraine. And that, is an additional kind of, on the nose sort of thing that you have to pay attention to. The US wants a ceasefire. The US wants a negotiation. The US is the ones that are like trying to get something moving, trying to get Zelensky to move in that direction somehow. And what we see is the reaction that I'm talking about right now is a strike on the Black Sea Fleet, the strike on the Kilo class submarine, this continued escalation ladder where they're just trying and trying and trying to get the Russians to react, try to do something to bring that attention back, try to get that Western support back to where it was in 2022, which it was huge. It was massive. I don't think anybody expected Western support to be as extensive as it has been, and the West is going to pay for that dearly, especially the Eurozone. I believe in the next coming years is going to be hit very, very hard by this whole Ukraine project. But that's neither here nor there. We're talking about the strike. So we come to the response portion of this. How should Russia respond to this strike? A lot of people in the pro-Russian spaces often say they need to go hard. They need to send a message, very clear message. They need to do some damage, right? And that's perfectly fine. I understand that line of logic, and I agree with it sometimes. I think that if you put somebody in their place, they will understand that they can't act any way that they want and just get away with it continuously like Ukraine has. Fully understand that. At this point in the war, though, with the Western support waning, right, with the Ukrainian army having failed their counteroffensive, the Russians are now, I mean, the footage over the last couple of days has been just, I would be very, 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 very concerned if I was the pro-Ukrainian information space right now, and I had like my reputation kind of riding on this conflict, because I have seen Russian reconnaissance UAVs penetrating extremely deep into Ukrainian territory. Just today, I saw multiple FAB videos, which I'll put up here. And these are the guided bombs that the Russians have been using. Some people say that they're now using the Fab 1500s, which I will post a video here claiming to be that. This is an incredibly large bomb. What you can see here is it hitting a warehouse, and then the warehouse burns for a little bit, and then finally explodes in a pretty spectacular fashion. That was in the Kherson region over the Dnieper River. And, that is happening daily all across the map. So that is massive. And the really important aspect of all of this is that reconnaissance drone has been present for multiple strikes. We've seen another train strike that was under the cover of a reconnaissance drone. That's a big deal because that's logistics now being targeted pretty openly by something like a Tornado S multiple launch rocket system, the 300 millimeter diameter missile system that it does a lot of damage. So, convoys are getting hit. You also have Guarantee. You have daily missile strikes now almost with incredible ISR. We've seen hits at airports. We had the MiG-29 a while back that got hit by a Lancet, but just recently we had a full video of basically a MiG-29 sitting at a base in, I think it's Krivoy Rog, could be Dnipropetrovsk, but I'm not sure exactly. I'll tag it in and make sure I get the right airport. But no, actually, it was in Nikolaev. Sorry, it was in Nikolaev. We saw a reconnaissance drone, which is some 50, 60 kilometers from the front line. So very deep behind Ukrainian air defenses. Which kind of tells you that Ukrainian air defenses on the front line is almost non-existent at this point, outside of probably man-pads, which can't really target these drones because they're very high up. And we see the missile come in and hit the plane, and that's the end of that. So Russian ISR is getting much stronger, which is their ability to deep strike, intelligence, reconnaissance, and surveillance. Which helps with target acquisition. So, the train strike, these FAB strikes, and this strike on the airport is all kind of a sign that that's what's going on. We've also had continued Garen strikes. The pressure is so immense on Ukraine right now, and they're feeling it from their backers. Poland has basically said that we're not going to deliver any more munitions or arms to Ukraine, which is important because while Poland is going into an election cycle, the popular thing in Poland is to not give arms to Ukraine. So they're feeling that pressure. And then on top of that, the Russians are pushing hard and defending very well and doing a lot of damage in the back. So Ukraine is just on the clock here. They're really feeling it, and you can kind of see it in their decision making, in some of their statements. It's getting a little irrational, and I think that they're really starting to feel that pressure, and that's why they're carrying out these attacks. So what should the Russians do? And what I think, and this is just my personal opinion, is that the Russians don't do anything. They just keep doing what they're doing. Maybe they loosen up on their rules of engagement that they have, and they hit some other targets maybe that they've been saving. Maybe they send a message somehow through some of these strikes, but nothing catastrophic, nothing that will put the Ukrainians in the position of power. See, what the Ukrainians are trying to do is trying to control Russia's next move. If we do something, Russia will be forced to do this, and then we will act in this way. It's like chess. They're trying to think 2 or 3 moves ahead. And what the Russians need to do is just focus on the game that they're playing right now, which I believe they are winning. You can look at a map. This offensive has completely failed. We're heading into almost October now, so it's getting particularly late. And still no major Ukrainian progress anywhere. It doesn't even feel like they're pushing as hard anymore. So, I think the best way for the Russians to approach this is just almost nonchalantly. And it's really hard, I think, for Western audiences to kind of be like, you're just letting them hit you. Like, you got to think about it like a little kid, right? You can't hit a little kid. Well, you could, I guess, but you can't, right? So there's this little kid and he's bugging you. He's pinching you. He's doing something to your leg. It's really annoying, right? But are you going to let that kid dictate how you behave as an adult? No. You're going to sit there and you're going to shoo him away. You're going to do what you need to do, but you're just going to keep doing what you're doing and not, let this little kid dictate what your moves are going to be. You can't do that, right? And that's the position Russia is in my opinion. They just have to sit back, keep winning the war the way they're winning it, keep winning this war geopolitically. I like to say that Ukraine is really like flashy. Like that's where the action is happening. Everybody likes to watch the military side of things. It's very interesting. We haven't really seen it in our lifetime very much. And now everything's on the internet. So we get to almost basically be there sometimes. And it is horrifying and intense and all of that. But you also have to focus on the rest of the world. Like if you consider this a war versus Russia and NATO, Ukraine is just the epicenter, right? There is things happening in Saudi Arabia, in North Korea, China, Iran, Africa, right? If French troops are now going to leave Niger by the end of the year, which basically means that there's probably not going to be any intervention. And that kind of means that Russia has secured another portion of this coup belt in Africa that is now anti-Europe, which means that Europe is losing its grip on its former colonies where it had a lot of control and power. And that means that, by extension, the US sphere of influence is shrinking. And that's kind of like that multipolarism idea that you hear a lot. Maybe just bipolarism, just two, but I know that's not what bipolar would, I mean, it is what it means, but not like the, condition, but just like two centers of control, whether that would be China and the United States or China, Russia, and the United States. So, something like that. The US is losing in other areas, and they're going to continue to lose because our foreign policy is absolute dog shit. So they're just going to keep losing and keep backing up. And the Russians just need to keep on doing what they're doing. Don't let anybody else change their course, and they're going to win. Will there be embarrassments? 100%. Should the Russians learn from these embarrassments and reduce the possibility of being embarrassed in the future? Absolutely. Are they going to? Probably not. Old dogs aren't really very good at learning new tricks, right? But the Russians are just going to keep doing what they're doing, in my opinion, and they're going to win. They already have their winter set up. They probably already have next summer set up. They know if they're going to mobilize or not. Who knows? They could be mobilizing already silently. We just don't know, right? But do not let things like a random building in Sevastopol getting struck elicit so much emotion that you're talking about destroying Kiev, right? Because that just plays right into your perceived enemy's hands, and you just don't want to do that. All right. I think that's where I'm going to end it here. I just really wanted to talk about that. And I hope that everybody got something out of it. I know I did a little bit. Every time I talk like this, it always helps me think things through. If you guys want to support me financially, Patreon is a great place to do it. I'm going to be setting up my Rumble here. I've just been really busy. Trying to just get these videos out has been kind of a pain, but I love doing it and I'm going to keep doing it. So look out for that. And then also look out for a Patreon video sometime this week. I'm going to get one up on there. All right. Take care, everybody. Until next time. Goodbye.